Everything, a podcast where we discuss everything from politics to pooping. I'm Sharon Guy.
And I'm Rosellen Rother. We're two 20-somethings living in San Francisco, trying to figure out what we're doing with our lives and talking it through for all y'all to hear.
So, your 20s are the time where you try to figure out your place in the world, what kind of life you want to live. And it's also a time where you get to know yourself. So this week, we're going to dive into how our backgrounds and culture, or lack thereof, has shaped and is shaping our sense of identity. If anyone's listening that doesn't already know us, I, Sharon, am very much Indian. My family, both my parents are from India. They were born and raised there. I was born and raised in San Diego. So I've dealt a lot with kind of the reconciling being Indian and coming from an Indian background, and also being brought up very American and in a predominantly white neighborhood. I was the only Indian in our graduating class of high school, and very limited number of Indian people in our town, right?
I didn't know any.
Yeah, so I was
besides your family,
the token Indian in our friend group. But it's also like, that is something that I started thinking about a lot lately, of just, what does that mean to me? And what does being Indian mean to me? And my family, we just came off this really amazing family reunion, and all of us were together, and there were just these moments where, like, I was like, we are so Indian, and it made me so happy. And then there's some moments where I'm like looking at us and I'm like, this is kind of, we're like a white family, and I'm like, this is weird, but I'm loving it. And it kind of just like perfectly encapsulated how much of a mix we are. And I just wanted to kind of define like what that mix is, of like what it means. And like our family's Punjabi Sikh, and like I don't feel very connected to the religion of being Sikh, but I feel very connected to being Punjabi. And that's like, it's interesting because then that brings up the religion topic of like what religion you're brought up with. And I was brought up going to Gurdwara, which is a Sikh temple, and even though I didn't understand Punjabi and I didn't understand what was being read, I still like feel like it was like a spiritual experience that like taught me good morals and values. And in Sikhism, you value community, and like that made me very family oriented and very aware of like service and giving back to the community. So I feel like that really played a part in forming my sense of like morals and values, even though like we aren't religious. Mm-hmm. What was your like experience growing up like with religion and like coming up with like morals and values?
So very different. I am white. My dad is Canadian, and his family was Jewish growing up, but also very non-religious. My dad refused to have a bar mitzvah at age 12. Like, not going to happen. He moved to the States to get his PhD at UCSB, our alma mater. But very, very non-religious. My mom was born in South Dakota and was raised Lutheran, which is a sect of Christianity, obviously. But she grew up and was well-educated and decided that she didn't believe in God, and is also very atheist. So there was complete lack of religion in my family growing up. It was never mentioned. I never learned the story of Jesus or anything. We did celebrate Christmas and Easter, just more of like a family holiday, and it was nice to do because it was fun when I was little, with presents and Easter and candy and everything, but there was never any religious background to it. So we never had church. We never had that community that you get with your religion. And I can see how beneficial that is for forming like a sense of self. And I definitely can see why people choose religion to kind of find themselves. I don't agree with that, and I think you can definitely find yourself without it, as I have and am doing. But my growing up was so different than yours, and I think like my culture was more of just my friends and who I played with on the street outside and school, and I don't think I would change it, but there's definitely a lack of that community. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I was so close with all my friends growing up, and why our family is great, but it wasn't like Jewish people that are very, very Jewish, like family is first. And it's the way with a lot of religions, family comes first. But when you're not super religious, it's like those values aren't as prevalent. So I think that kind of goes back to last week, how I was talking about how like my family just wasn't that like, we didn't celebrate big holidays together because there just weren't that many of us.
So how do you feel like the lack of religion then fed into your identity now?
I feel like I had my own experiences throughout life that taught me how to be a good person. Like, I didn't need to go off of the Bible or the Torah or like anything like that. Like, I was able to form my own opinions about the world, and I'm still doing that every day. But there wasn't like morals that were taught to me from a young age from a book and from a religion. So like, my parents taught me how to be a good person, but that wasn't based on religion at all. So like, very opinionated, and I believe that I have a strong personality, but it's not rooted in any sort of spirituality or anything like that. So I can be very blunt sometimes, but it's like, I don't know. Yeah, I guess that doesn't relate back to religion, but it is a hard topic to see like who you are. Like, it's making me realize that I don't really know, but I think that the lack of that is part of me.
Yeah, and it's something that's like, actually, you realize you are growing into that. Asking these questions, like, for me, it's very much of like, I feel so American and so white, and I think it's because my exposure when I was young, it was very compartmentalized. Of like, the Indian stuff was very separate from the white stuff, and like school and my friends. Like, it was, I always had this kind of struggle of like, oh, the Indians though, but the girls, it's like always this struggle.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's come throughout my life, but now I'm learning to mix the two, and it's interesting of like how that mix comes together, because I feel like you guys as like my friends are so curious about the culture, and that makes me more proud of it. Whereas when I was younger, I felt like I couldn't relate to anyone around me with the Indian culture, so I would just kind of push that part of me aside and just like adopt whatever I was exposed to. And so that is like where I'm coming to now, of like trying to expose myself to more Indian things. Like, and it's hard because outside of school, I feel like college made it a lot easier because there was just an Indian community there. And like, obviously in the Bay Area, there is an Indian community, but it's hard to find where you kind of can find what you like about it. And I feel like that's where I'm on this, like, okay, I'm excited to share it with my friends, but I'm like, I also want to share it with other Indians.
Yeah. I mean, I was so curious about your culture when we first became friends. I remember meeting you in English class in 7th grade. We didn't really start hanging out until 8th grade, but going to your house for the first time and seeing like the pink sofas and like the smell of your house is so ingrained. Like, I remember it so well, and trying the food and going to your sister's weddings. Like, we got to wear all of the outfits, and I just loved it all. I always said, like, if I could be any other race, I would want to be Indian, because I just had so many fond memories of being your friend at a young age.
Were you exposed to any other ones?
Not really.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. Like, Mexican culture, no, didn't really have any. Like, I went to school, there were a lot of Latino kids at my elementary school. So I was used to seeing them around, but I didn't have any friends that were of that culture. Asian, not really. The Asian friends we had in like middle school and high school were all like half Asian. So it was all very white, you know, like they lived.
Well, that's the thing. So like, that's how I feel that our lack of exposure to those other cultures, like where we're really ingrained in it, is what's preventing us like from realizing how amazing they are, or like understanding them better. And I feel like that is where our country is right now, of like losing sight of what America was built on, of like welcoming all cultures, welcoming the persecuted, like welcoming people who aren't welcome in their own country. And I think we've lost sight of that, because right now we're like, we're othering each other. Like, it's like us versus them. And it's like everyone is getting so segregated in their own groups that it's only like inciting more fear and more hatred, because people don't understand each other. And like the openness is gone of like, let me learn about your culture and let me be immersed in it to understand like where you're coming from, rather than being like, I don't understand you, so I'm going to fear you.
Well, with the media and everything so negative, like all we hear is the bad stuff about some of these cultures, and that's what brings up so much fear. People are scared that they think that's the only thing is the bad stuff that they hear. But like, I think you're like the one friend that like I learned so much from. Like, imagine if I had like 5 other friends, like we're of all different cultures. I could be so like, I could have so many great experiences. I wish that, I mean, I'm always down to meet new people, but like I'm not going to have that experience with anyone else like from
childhood
15 years ago,
Yeah.
you know? Like I've learned so much about Indian culture from being your friend. If only I could have had like a Chinese friend,
And it's
you know,
crazy
like
also like how much you still don't know.
Yeah.
Like being friends for so long and there's so much. Like obviously in the beginning you asked the questions of like, do they have washing machines in India?
oh my God, that was one time.
But like that was the moment for me of like, oh
Wow,
like,
this girl's an idiot.
no, of like people really don't know
Yeah.
things about India. Like that was like a clicking moment for me as like 9th grade or something where I'm like, wow, people really just have no education about other places in the world.
Well, think about me as a teenager, very uneducated about Indian culture. What I have seen is poverty and people washing their clothes in the river. So that's what I
And
was
that
like,
is
is that what you
there.
do? I didn't realize that your family was like your family is of the wealthy side in
Well,
India.
it's not only my family. It's just like, do washing machines exist in India? And I'm like, yes, they do.
I think where I was going was, do you have washing machines in
Oh.
India? Not do they exist? But
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's also the thing of like, there is such a poverty gap there where it's like, there's extremely wealthy and then there's like extremely poor. And like, you see both. Like, it's such a juxtaposition. Like, I haven't been in 10 years, so I can't say like how extreme it is now. But like, I just remember being so thrown by seeing that. And so I think knowing how other like cultures live, this is kind of what we were getting at last week of like travel, see the world, like open up your mind, like give yourself new perspective of like how other people live.
Get out of your tribe of white friends, you know, experience
Yeah.
other cultures. It's great to travel, but even living in the United States, there's so much opportunity to expand your horizon with friendships and other cultures.
Yeah.
What was it like, tell me a little bit about your like experience with like racism, and I know you talked to your family about this when you saw them, but like, how was that growing up?
Honestly, like, feel like I was a little bit more oblivious to it, and I'm realizing it now. Like, there were moments growing up, like in kindergarten, I had like 3 different girls come up to me and start speaking Spanish, like right off the bat, and I just stared at them of like, and I realize now, I'm like, they had probably never seen another brown person that doesn't speak Spanish.
Yeah, I can see that.
So I was like, of course. But I'm like, I understand that. And obviously, kindergartners aren't racist. It's like, you know what you know.
Yeah.
And like, I've just been like, also just asked questions of like, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, San Diego. And they're like, oh no, but where are you really from? I'm like, fucking San Diego. Like, that's where I'm from. And I'm like, I know what they're asking. I'm like, you can ask somebody, what's your ethnicity? It's not offensive. Except,
Or
like,
where's your family from?
yeah,
Or-
and like people have gotten there, but it's like it takes them a couple of
Yeah.
tries of me not answering from like, okay, where are you really, what are you really asking me?
Yeah.
And it's weird that it bothers me so much because I'm like, yes, I am proud of being Indian, but I'm also really proud of being American. And like, that's where I feel like there's this hard thing of when we were younger, there was such this negative connotation of being Indian, of like, oh, do you have an accent? Oh, do you smell like curry? Like, those kinds of things. Like, there was just such a strong stereotype of Indians that we wanted to remove ourselves from it. And now I'm feeling like I kind of want to just embrace it a little bit more. But I was talking to my sister about other ways that like we may have experienced racism, and she asked me, she's like, have you ever made a reservation at a restaurant and then shown up and like the person was surprised? And I was like, yeah, but I just thought because I was just so beautiful, they were like so distracted. And I was like, I didn't really pay attention to it. I didn't think twice about it. I was just like, oh, I'm like, okay, they could be surprised for anything reason. I'm like, I'm early. Surprise!
That would be a surprise.
I know.
Sharon's
so-
never early.
So it's just like those types of things. And like, I talked to my male cousins who grew up Sikh and they didn't cut their hair, so they wore their hair up on their head in a patka, and it's like covered in a fabric. And my cousin was in middle school teased and bullied to no end because of it. And it's something I think that girls experience less of being discriminated against because of being Indian. I feel like I never really felt that of being an outsider. And I think it's just because there was nobody else, so I kind of just, like, adopted what I knew. Like, I knew white culture, I knew American culture, I knew the surfer vibe of SDA, so I'm like, okay, here we go. But it's harder now where I'm like, okay, I know everything and I can choose like what I'm embracing. So now I'm like, okay, I want to embrace more of the Indian culture. But I'm like, I don't feel like we as Indians, in my experience, have experienced the same type of racism that other people of color, like Black people or Latinos, have experienced. Like, I don't think that I would like tell my son, I don't know, like we don't teach our children to act differently the way that I've had conversations with Black people who are raising their kids, and she is talking about how has to talk to her son about how to act in public and how to act in front of police officers. And like, that's something that white people would never really say to their kids. And like, that's something that my dad's never had a conversation with my brothers about it. They've never had a conversation with my cousins about it. Like, that's a different experience.
The fact that parents need to warn their kids, like, you're going to hear this word said to you and it's really bad. And like, they have to explain the history behind it. And it must seem so hard for like a small child to hear that. And like, there's never a right age to hear that kind of thing, you know?
And you don't want to have to raise your kids like with that fear. But on the other hand, since 9/11, my dad has been the victim of racism because of the turban that he wears. Like, people just don't understand that like wearing a turban does not equal terrorist. Like,
people don't see the religion behind it. They see the negative stuff they see on the news, and the people that are bad people that wear turbans, they just assume
there's
that
been so many hate
same.
crimes against Sikhs, and it's so sad because it's like, what is it rooted in? It's rooted in hate and ignorance. And like, that's what breaks my heart. And like, that's what makes me want to raise awareness more about learning about other cultures. It's like, embrace the diversity of this country, embrace that we're all different, embrace that there's so many different cultures that enrich our life. Like, think about food. There's so much different types of
think about food
amazing food in the US because of all of these cultures coming together. The fusion things that have come up, like all the food truck stuff, like that, I feel like perfectly just is an analogy of like the melting pot that is America. It's like all the food comes together, they're jiving real well. Like, we got some great fusions going on. Why don't we like kind of bring that mentality into our cultures and into our lifestyle, like into our mentality. Like, but it's hard because I'm conflicted because I want America to feel more cohesive. I want there to be this sense of community within the country, but I also want us to embrace our differences. And I want us to know, like, embrace that there's different cultures, embrace that there's different languages being spoken. Like,
we're so far from like losing culture. Like, we need to work harder to embrace the differences before we need to worry about the differences going away, you know?
Totally.
Like, Donald Trump needs to be eliminated, and we need to work harder to appreciate everyone's differences and not kick everyone who isn't white out of the country.
Yeah, and I feel like that's where Donald Trump is doing well, because when you can spread fear so easily, because if you're not promoting other people to get to know like what they don't know already, it's kind of, that's like what's fueling the fire.
It's lack of education and ignorance, and those people that support him are uneducated.
Yeah, it's like education and exposure. Like, those are the two things that will help like combat racism, that will help combat conflict in this country. Is like, if we're just a little bit more open and we educate ourselves and we expose ourselves to other cultures, other races, and not make enemies out of them just because we don't know enough about them.
Yeah, definitely. San Francisco, you see a lot. Like, sometimes I feel scared walking down the street, and it's like mostly because of homeless people, not the race of the homeless people, but like even in my workplace, like there's so many new people around me all the time, and I'm usually quiet and stay in my office and talk to my coworkers at my own company. But it's like, you can even at one happy hour, you know, you meet a couple new people that are like come from a completely different country. You have a conversation with them, and it just like makes me feel so happy afterwards. Like, I maybe like at first not want to talk to them, but then once you hear a conversation, and like it just opens your mind up to the possibilities of like learning so many new things from people.
Yeah, that's how I feel about our friendship with Javane. Like, we've learned so much about the Persian culture, about like her family in Iran and her experience with that. Like, that is new to us. Like, it's a new friendship, but it's like, that's so enlightening, and I'm so curious to learn more. And I'm like, we need more diversity up in here. Like,
definitely. Yeah,
like,
curiosity is so important. My dad always told me I wasn't curious enough. And he would always want to tell me stories about his family, and as a young child, I couldn't care less. But I apologize to him all the time for acting not curious enough. And I do care, and I am curious now that I'm mature, but like, of course, you're talking to a 12-year-old, they're not going to care about the stories of your grandparents in Eastern Europe,
Well, now I'm so curious. Like,
Yeah.
my uncle was telling us about stories about, like, my grandfather and, like, his life, like, before, like, when my dad was young. And, like, my sister and I had no idea. We're fascinated. We're like, why do we know nothing about this? Like, another thing of, like, my grandparents lived in India during, like, when India declared independence and during partition, where Punjab was, like, cut, like, by the border, and people, like, Muslims and went one way and Sikhs went the other way, and like it was what was that experience? I'm like, you guys were alive during that. And I can't have that conversation with them because I don't speak Punjabi. And like that every day I'm just like, I'm so ashamed, but I'm just like, this is such a sign of like how I grew up, of like we were so leaning towards the American side and we should have been leaning towards the Indian side.
Do your parents know the stories though? Because they can talk to their parents and find out information.
No, that's
and
what we were
you.
telling my uncle to like make a documentary and like film these things. It's like our grandparents are getting old and like they have so much to say and like so many stories and like so many insights on our family, and like we have a huge family.
My grandma left behind like multiple binders. Like this is what she spent like her last years doing, was like creating like her life story in a binder.
Wow.
And like we have it now at my house, but it was like a detailed account of her life, like from basically when she married my grandpa and like the job she had, the people she met, like
That's so
documents,
cool.
everything. Like it's a good thing to leave behind, especially when your grandkids couldn't care less before.
Yeah.
And now I can learn it. And it was a very interesting account of her life.
Yeah, I would love to see something like that.
When I was just home for the weekend, my mom pulled me aside and she said, look at what I've been doing. This is my most recent project. And I'm like, oh, Mom, what's your new project? Like, teaching yourself another language? But she had Googled, like, a bunch of her ancestors. So like, her family's from Norway and Germany. So, like, her dad's side was Norwegian and her mom's side was straight out of Germany. And she was literally Googling these people's names and stuff was coming up. She's like, I'm not using Ancestry.com. That they charge you. Like, this was a free search. You can Google people. And, like, she printed out photos. She's like, this is my great, great, great grandmother. And I was like, you're losing me slowly. I was like trying to stay with her.
I would love to see that, though. There's no documentation of that stuff in India.
Yeah. She's like, these people were in South Dakota, like, when Americans were fighting, like, the Sioux Indians.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, we learned about that in history, and, like,
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, so, like, the history of, like, the culture is so interesting. Like, they had a very strong Norwegian culture, probably, and it's, like, it kind of just got diluted throughout the generations. It becomes, like, American culture. It's, like, for me, I'm, like, I'm second generation. So it's like, it's not diluted
so new,
yet.
Yeah.
It's so new, but I'm also, like, so influenced by the American side of it. And, like, there's all these terms, like, you don't want to be a fob, like, fresh off the boat. And, like, ABCD is American-born, confused, Desi. And Desi just means, like, Indian or brown. And then they're like, oh, you're so whitewashed. I'm like, I'm all three. Like, I have my fobbiness.
I don't think you're confused.
I'm not confused, but it's, like, confused in the sense that you think you're American. That's what they say.
You are American. You were born here. You're so American. You're like, your viewpoints, the way you see, like, the way you see the world and the education you've gotten is all so American.
I get that, but I'm also like,
your ethnicity is not American.
Yes, and my culture also. Like, I want part of my culture. That's American. The thing. It's like, it's the mix of two, but I don't want the American to, like, drown out the Indian side of it. So it's like, what about the Indian side do I want to, like, hold on to? And it's really hard but then I think about it, I'm like, okay, like, what are the things about me that I like about being Punjabi? And, like, Punjabi's, like, so culturally rich. Like, they've instilled, like, in me, like, respect for elders. Like, we're very fun loving. We love to dance. Like, all, like, getting dressed up for events and, like, these things are important to me. Like, that's, like, I feel like being Punjabi taught me to be so family oriented, just because we have a huge family and it's like family comes first. I don't know if that came from being Sikh or being Punjabi. Like, they're so they're often really interchangeable, but they're so separate and they're so different. Because then Sikhism, like, taught me the importance of, like, everyone is created equal in the eyes of God. Whether I believe in God or not, still don't know. But the aspect of equality, yes. And, like, the notion of giving back to your community and the notion of having a community. And like that to me is so important. And those are like the values of Sikhism. And then it's like the American culture. I'm like, I'm very outspoken. I'm like very much for equal rights and feminism. And like Indian culture, like women are more subdued. And I'm like, hell no, that's just not me at all. And I feel like some people are like surprised to learn that about me also. It's like, I'm just not like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's like very much the American side of me, but that's also very much like my mom's influence of like be independent and be self-sufficient and like have your freedom, which I definitely like. Also, wanting to be tan is like such an American thing. Like Indians frown upon getting dark, and I'm like, I'm fresh off from Huntington, and I'm like bronzed and so happy. And
Typical
it's just,
Sharon quote is, I can't get any darker.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm like, soak up the sun. I'm trying to get as tan as possible.
Don't ever say that in front of your like pasty white friends. They don't appreciate it.
Seriously, STFU Sharon. I'm so white from winter. She's like, I can't get any more brown.
Well, I know. So that's the thing is like the Indian thing is like so old. It's so antiquated of like dark skin means you spend all your day out in the sun. So you're not wealthy and like you have to work manual labor. And I'm like, no, my manual labor is laying by the pool. Thank you. Well, I'll pick up my beach chair.
If that's not white privilege, I don't know what is.
I know. But then also, I also feel like I have like French influence on my identity also. Like along with being American, Punjabi, Sikh, and then like I feel like Paris has had such an influence on like bitchy resting face walking down the street. Like I don't smile at anyone walking on the street at all. And like the way I dress and like just the way I carry myself, I feel like spending time in Paris, like I just enjoyed, I liked the way they did it. And now I find myself just like feeling that in myself. And I'm like, oh, where'd this come from? I'm like, okay. So it's just like a weird, you're like, I don't know. I never know whether I'm like actually discovering these things about me or like they're like developing.
Unfortunately, I don't think my bitchy resting face comes from any one country. I think it's just the way my face muscles work.
No, but it's different. Like my sister came to Paris and she was like smiling at everybody. I'm like, you cannot smile at people. They will follow you.
Interesting.
So like I got used to not smiling at anyone when I was walking in the street or was in the metro because they will literally follow you.
Oh, so creepy.
So it's scary.
Yeah.
So I like taught myself not to smile at people, and now I catch myself just like not smiling at all. And like I've like run into people in the street and they're like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." What? Like
Americans do smile a lot, and they smile with their mouths open. Like Europeans have such bad teeth that they don't want to smile. That's why they don't smile with their mouths open in photos.
Interesting. It's a whole other thing.
So, what else? Wanted to talk about your experience in college, because I know you were like you tried to stray away from the whole Indian thing in high school, and once you got to UCSB, you realized there was this whole community there that was just like waiting for you. And
I wasn't going to go to the first meeting. Like I wasn't actually seeking it out. And
no pun intended.
Oh, funny.
God, you walked right into that one.
I know. I need more wine. Yeah, I wasn't looking for it. My sister actually forced me to go. She called me and she's like, you just have to check it out. Just give it a chance. And of course, lo and behold, I go and they're like, oh, sign up for the Bhangra team. And I'm like, yes, please. I was just like, I don't know. It just
you made so many friends from that.
I made so many
lifelong friends.
Yes.
Lifelong friends that are my friends.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that.
So it just felt, I think I didn't know what community I was missing out on until I went, and I was just like, oh, like this feels
a friends
right.
community, not a family community.
Yes. And it's like where I kind of was explored my phobby side. And like it was fun to like be like that with people who aren't your family, right? Like with my sisters and my cousins, it was easy to just like get into like the Bollywood movies and do that and dancing and like our family weddings and stuff like that. But when it came to like being at UCSB, it's like I'm choosing this, and like with going to the banquets at the end of the year and like starting the Bollywood dance team with my friend Natasha, and like that was something that we chose to do, and it was so fun, and I miss it now. Like I don't miss putting together dances for weddings, which is currently what I'm doing, which is a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. Like performing's a lot of fun, and like you feel connected to the culture. So I feel like that's what happened to me in college. Is like there was that sense of community there that I didn't know that was possible.
Oh, your face when you're dancing too is just like You're so happy. Sharon's a great dancer, everyone. If you ever have a chance to watch her perform,
Thanks.
you should do it.
It's just so fun.
Yeah.
Like, the adrenaline.
The music is so happy.
Yeah.
It's like so awesome. I love it.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, so like that's a way that I like to connect to the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's yeah, so college was definitely somewhere I explored mixing the two also of like hanging out with that's the thing. It was never like a group of like white people and Indian people. It was always just
at
like
our parties.
The Indians. Yeah, at our parties, but it's like it was never like when it's like the Indians, we're going to hang out with the Indians.
Yeah.
Or like,
I always wanted you to bring them to our stuff.
I did.
Yeah, they were great.
And like I brought you guys to like the Indus parties, but like nobody else really did that. Or they just hung out with other Indians. I don't know.
Yeah. It's easy to exclude people, you know? Like, people just feel excluded if they don't have a reason to bond with your group, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't feel that way because I've been friends with you for so long, and I loved everything about the culture and stuff. But, like, it's easy for people to feel left out.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, but gotta try harder.
Yeah. I like having a mix of both. And I think that's what it is. It's like finding the right balance. And like, I feel like a lot of other people who are Indian American who either like moved here when they were super young or were born in America, like have these similar experiences. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think. If like other Indians are listening, like send us a message. We have an email address. It's 4, the number 4, and then 20 something written out at gmail.com. I'd love to hear like other people's experience, if they've experienced racist comments or if they experienced privilege and they didn't know, or just, I don't know. I feel like this is a very unique thing that second generation immigrants are experiencing, like that reconciling two cultures and which one, can you choose it or is it kind of just ingrained in you? And I don't know. It's an interesting topic because it has a lot to do with how you define yourself and what you think of your own identity and what your own culture is. And it's okay to have a mix of the two, and it's okay to have a mix of 3. It's like you kind of just do what works for you. But it's like, I think it's important to ask yourself those questions. Like, I don't think you've thought about those things before we started talking about it.
Honestly, no. And I was thinking about that before recording this podcast. Like, doing this podcast alone has taught me so much about myself because we're forcing ourselves to talk about these heavy topics that are not necessarily easy to discuss.
Yeah.
And it takes some work to find the answers to those tough questions.
Just like introspection. It's like ask yourself these questions and like it's finding yourself. And like I feel like that will help you in the long run. It's like the more you get to know yourself, the more confident you feel in your own skin. Mm-hmm. I feel like that resonates throughout, like, and permeates throughout your life.
Totally. And like just having conversations with friends, like it doesn't always have to be trivial about The Bachelor, you know, like
which we're not covering.
We're not talking about this week. Wasn't that good? But yeah, that's what being a young adult is all about, is exploring who you are and trying new things and discussing those experiences with people that you're close to, and you can learn so much from doing that.
And asking questions. Like I feel like everyone's so afraid of offending somebody now. Like they won't ask.
Yeah.
And like I also think like people shy away from bringing up politics or bringing up their opinions on things because they're afraid that it might rock the boat or it might not be what it's not whatever the majority thinks or something like that. And it's like
not the party topic. Like no one wants to talk about it.
I am never the one to talk party topics. I'm always the one at parties. I'm like, tell me about your life. I'm like the serious topic person. Like, I get in trouble. Because I'm interested. I'm like, I want to know these things about people. I think we've all had our own unique experiences, and that's built us into the humans we are, and that's shaping who we're going to become. And I'm like, let's talk about it more. And I feel like rather than having these lighthearted topics, like at our family reunion, like I brought it up. I'm like, let's talk about race. Let's talk about racism. Like, and of course it's me.
Let's talk about race. What a great question to start a family reunion.
I'm curious because I'm like, you won't know unless you ask.
Yeah.
Like with my grandparents, I'm like, we're not going to know that history unless we ask questions.
Nani Mama, tell me how you feel about race.
I mean, that would be interesting too. Mm-hmm. Like as an Indian woman in the airport, what does she experience? Does she get strip searched? Probably not.
There's a lot of layers under that.
Oh my God, she'd be so violated.
Yeah.
Poor thing. I hope that never happens.
Yeah.
But I'm like, my dad's been like pulled aside for a random search many times. So now he's started not wearing his turban to the airport. But I'm like,
if you're in a hurry, it sucks.
But that's the thing, though. It's like, it's a religious thing. And like that, there was a Sikh model and actor that was like asked to get off a plane earlier this year or last year because he was wearing his turban. And like, I don't remember what exactly the reason was. But like, he made a big stink about it because it's like,
he should.
Yeah, he should. And like, there's, I just actually saw this really great, like, photography exhibit that's going to be in New York about showcasing Sikhs in America and like all the different types of people that they are. So there's like somebody who's in the army, and there's like that model dude, and then there's like this woman who's like studying to be a doctor, and like all just kind of, and like everyone's like wearing something that signifies that they're Sikh, and like that is powerful. And I feel like we should be embracing what makes us different, and like and not only embracing it, but then also being curious about what makes somebody else different.
Yeah.
Like, what sets you apart? And also, like, that's what brings us together. Yeah. If that makes sense.
I feel like the most meaningful things that we say can come across as so, like, corny. But, like, some of the questions we ask, like, how does culture, like, influence who you feel you are? It's like, it sounds really corny at first, but those are the tough questions that are hard to answer.
Like, really think about how you feel about things.
Maybe that's why we shy away and call them corny things, because we don't want to answer them when it comes down to it.
Yeah, but we're thinking about it. And I'm like, I feel like it's something important for everyone to think about. And it's like, getting to know yourself can only lead to good things.
Yeah.
So.
For sure.
All right. That's a wrap. Thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or the podcast app so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear from you about anything. If you have questions, comments, love letters, send them our way. Our email address is 420something@gmail.com. That's the number 420something spelled out @gmail.com. Thanks again.
Bye.